Hi class, this is the first screencast tutorial. This year I've got a little webcam so you can look at my face when I'm talking to you. Sometimes I'll try and keep me up in the corner so that I don't get in the way of most of the stuff that I'm going to show you. Today's practicum is going to be about basically the introduction, the basics of using QGIS. This is your first moment to use some software in this class. And it's also your first moment to use to start working with the data for Project 1, the first assignment for the class. Hopefully you've all had a chance to try and install QGIS and to also download the data zip file from the course Blackboard, Talgar GIS data.zip. If you're unfamiliar with a zip file, it's just an archive. You have to unzip it. On Windows, you have to have WinZip or something like that. On Mac or Linux, Linux is the operating system that I'm using here and that is available in the computer labs. All you have to do is to right-click it and go down to where it says extract here. Mac might be slightly different, but same idea. There's a way to just extract it right away. In Windows, like I said, you probably have to download WinZip or something like that. And what you'll see is just a folder called Talgar GIS data. You can keep the zip archive or you can throw it away in the trash. At this moment, it doesn't matter. Inside this is a very basic project that I've set up for you for QGIS. I'll talk about these folders and the things that are inside of them in just a minute, but first I'm just going to talk about getting QGIS up and running. So the computer's in the lab, it's over here in the menu item. You just find the icon for QGIS, which is this right here, QGIS Desktop, or you can search for it in the little file browser, QGIS, it'll show up. On Mac or Windows, you can find the icon probably somewhere on your desktop or in the applications folder, but either way, you just click on it and the program starts up. And you see the little splash screen over here. It will say a couple of messages. It might take a little longer the very first time you start it up because it's setting up the stuff in the background. Now, as you can see, I use QGIS a lot, so it shows me a bunch of projects that I've got going on. Yours will probably be blank at this particular moment here. So I'll put my face back up here. And so basically what you're going to see is a blank area over here. You'll probably see the file browser over here and something called the layers panel. And then you'll see all of these icons up here at the top and then a whole bunch of menu items at the top. Okay? So basically what this is this big window over here where my mouse is moving right now is the map display. It's where you're going to see visually the maps. This is the file browser where you'll get to all your raw data that's stored on your hard drive or something like that. And then over here you'll see the individual GIS layers that you've brought into your particular QGIS project. All of these other icons are just to help you do various operations that are common, like import and export data over here, or to view and query and sometimes edit and manipulate data over here. And then all of these menu items at the top are to do more in-depth operations. So we have up here a raster menu item with a whole bunch of operations that you can do on rasters, a vector one for a whole bunch of things you can do on vectors. You got a database. The web one we will definitely use in the first project. Processing to do some even more in-depth stuff, which we'll talk about eventually. And then you have plugins to extend the capability, settings so you can make the program work exactly the way you want, and then things about the layers to create new ones, which we will definitely do in the first project, and to show them. And then over here in the view, basically we just have ways to customize your view, including things like adding a grid, which we will talk about next time as well. And then you have project menu over here where you can actually save the project, make a print composer, which we will also deal with a couple of practicums from now. So basically what you want to do right now is to make it easy on you, I've already created a QGIS project file. And you could have double-clicked on this, but I'll just show you how you can navigate in your computer or in the browser panel over here to that file. So I happen to have downloaded the zip file and extracted it under Documents and then something I called working directory WRKDR. And so there's my Talgar GIS data. And if I click on it, I actually see all those folders and the project file itself. So the easiest way to get started for you guys right now will be just to double click on the project file. And it may look funky like this at the beginning, but don't worry about that. We're gonna fix that. It's just sort of a little glitch in the current version of QGIS. So basically what you have down here are two layers that I've pre-added for you in the project. You have something called survey units and something called LS8 natural color P-sharp. This is actually a satellite image from Landsat 8, and we'll talk about that later in the course. By default, it kind of brings it in with the weird colors, so usually what I do is actually just right-click on it. That was a right-click, and then remove it. And then I go back here to my project file, and I find raster, and I see the same thing, and then I just double-click on it, and it comes back in. Now, you may have noticed something right now, right off the bat, which is what happened to the orange survey units. They seem to have disappeared. Well, the order that you see things over here in the layer menu is exactly the order that they're going to appear stacked up on top of each other like this, right? So imagine like layer cakes or sheets of paper, or better yet, transparencies that you would put on an overhead projector or something like that. Whatever's on top is going to be on top on the display. So in order to get those survey units to show up, all we do is to click on that and drag it down underneath, and now you see the layer units right there. That's sort of the basics of the layer manager here. We're going to talk about a few other things, but first what I'm going to do is shrink everything down so you can actually see my face. I'm realizing that you can't see my face. There you go. I should have done like this, the layer manager layers like that. Those are the gestures that I were doing when you couldn't actually see the webcam. Okay, so let's talk about some real basic things that we can do now that we've got our project open. What we can do is add more layers. We can query and we can style some of these layers that we already have. So let's first deal with adding new layers. There are multiple ways to actually add layers in QGIS. You can do it from the layer dialog, add layer, and then you can go down and find the variety of layers. Sometimes we have to do this because there's a greater variety shown in this menu than there are over here in the little quick access panel. But there's a bunch of them over here. The two main ones are add vector layer and add raster layer. If we want to do that, we can absolutely do that. We can click on one of those things. It'll bring up this little dialog, and then we can browse somewhere on here on our computer to find any kind of data that we might have. Probably the easiest way is to just use the file browser like I did to add back this panel over here, because it will automatically discover, or at least it will code the different kinds of files that it will be able to read. So you can see here, this raster file has this little checkerboard icon. It tells you that this is a raster file. If I open the vector, there's a couple of folders in there, and you can see it gives you this weird little, to me it looks like a swimming pool, but it's the shape of a vector, right, and under here. So that tells you this is a vector file, this is a raster file over here. Now, this is the full browsing tree of your entire computer. Once you have a project saved, what's really nice, QGIS gives you this new item here that says Project Home, and basically that only shows you the things that are at the level of the project file or above. And I'm going to talk about that more in depth here in a second. So this is really helpful if you've already collated a bunch of GIS data into one directory and you just want to work in that. You don't want to have to search through all kinds of different folders and files and that kind of stuff to find what you're looking for. So let's go ahead and add another vector layer. I'm going to add streams. It's real simple. All I do is just double click on that, and now I have a vector file of streams. And this is something I created from some separate data, and you can see it doesn't fully cover the entire region that we're shown in this satellite image, but it covers most of it. All right. We can also add this one that says cities, and you'll see a couple of dots pop up, again a little bit off the map. And then you can put this other one that says world borders 0.3, and then you can click on this one right here. The files that we're looking for are the ones that say .shp. And unfortunately, it looks like, we made a mistake. That's because Kazakhstan is much bigger than that, And so if we zoom out, which we can do pretty simply over here with one of these tools, we can draw a bounding box like this and zoom out. Or actually, probably easier, even without selecting this tool, is just to use the mouse scroll wheel to scroll out. We can actually start to see, oh look, now it makes sense why the screen turned all brown. Now we can see all of the world over here. So let's actually start with this file here when we talk about styling our image and potentially making it a little nicer than just all brown or something like that. So the first thing that you'll do is to go over here. You can either right-click on it and select Properties, or even easier, just double click on the file and the Properties Layer Properties dialog pops up. And the first thing you'll see is this bunch of tabs over here that you can kind of click through. The most useful one right off the bat is going to be the one labeled Style, right? Style is what we're really interested in. Here we have a basic thing that says Fill and Simple Fill and Single Symbol and all this kind of stuff. So for now, we're just going to leave this first tab over here alone at Single Symbol, and we're just going to click down here where it says Simple Fill, and we get a bunch more information about basically the colors, right? So what you can see is black is the lines and brown is the color. We don't like the brown color, so I'm going to pick another one. So I just click on it, I get this really fancy dialog. I got a simple one to pick some standard colors. I've got a nice color wheel that you can, do as normal to pick the colors like that. I have this nice hue thing where I can just move my mouse around and all these and then I have these sliders over here where I can also move them around if I want. And you see here HTML notation. Each color, believe it or not, has a special hashtag code. So if you know it, really what the color is you want, you can even put that in completely. So this is for the fill by itself. If I just click OK and then I click Apply down here, you can see in the background the fill is now turned purple. And I clicked Apply instead of OK because I don't want to close this dialog right now. So that was the fill, and here is the line right here. And I can do the same exact thing. I can pick a standard color. Let's just pick green for now. And I can click OK and I can click Apply, and now my lines are green, and now I have purple and green, which is shocking to my eyes. It's kind of blinding me how crazy it is, right? So obviously you want to be a bit more mindful of the colors that you choose. You want them to complement each other because we're all about readability as opposed to just shocking the eye. And if I pick something like this, that reads a little bit better, right? Kind of nice in this particular case. I can also now change the width of the lines over here where it says outline width. I can just click it up to 0.86 millimeters. I can actually change millimeters to pixels or whatever I want. If I apply that, you'll see the lines have become thicker. It's a little bit more readable in some cases, depending on the scale that we're zoomed in. There's a whole bunch of other things over here that you can fool with. Now, we haven't messed with transparencies, and there are multiple ways to do transparencies. If you want the entire layer to be a little bit transparent, this is the slider down here where it says Layer Transparency. You move it over, the bigger the number, the more transparent. If I move it to 40, it is now 40% transparent. And I can actually see the layers that are underneath it. Remember the layer dialog, like the transparency films? If the top one is put fully opaque, you're not going to see what's underneath. But if you make it a little bit see-through, then you will see a little bit of those underneath fading through. They're not going to be as bright as they are if the image on top is below it, but they're going to be visible. So this is kind of what we call data fusion. We're actually fusing the information from multiple layers together by messing with transparencies. Now, layer transparency made the whole layer somewhat transparent, including the borders. If we didn't want to do that, if we just wanted the fill to be transparent, we have to do that back at the filled color dialog. We would click on that here, and we would set the color the way we want it, and we go over here and we see this opacity slider. Right now it's at 100% opaque. So it kind of works a little bit opposite of the layer transparency, is going in the different direction. And to get the same amount of transparency as we just saw, we would set it to 60% here. Then we click OK and apply. And now we see the lines are still perfectly solid, but the fill is 40% transparent or 60% opaque, I guess. Flip sides of the same coin. And I'm pretty happy with that, so I'm going to click OK, and that looks pretty neat. But what I really want to do is to have my survey units come to the top, so I drag them up, and to have my Landsat image just under where it says cities right there, and then to have my streams above my Landsat image. And now you might be wondering, where the heck did all that stuff go? You can barely see it right here. You can definitely use the zoom tool here, and you can zoom to it like this. That's fine. By the way, there's some other zoom tools here. This button right here, you can go back to your previous zoom immediately like that, just the last one that you saw. Or what's really cool is you can pick whatever layer that you're interested in. You can right click on it and you can click zoom to layer, and it will zoom right to the extent of the layer. So that's really quite useful for getting you exactly to where you want to, the place that you want to see. So I'm going to turn the streams off here. What I'm going to do is actually to move the pan sharpened Landsat just above the world borders. And if you zoom out, that kind of makes a nice view of southern Kazakhstan right there. You don't need all these other layers. This is kind of getting in the way at the moment, but I'm just showing you right now how you can style your own images. So let's look at this, what we got right here. This is what we're really interested in for Project 1. We have survey units here. Let's style those things too. So we go to our Properties dialog, and let's do exactly the same thing. We'll go to Simple Fill, we'll click on the fill, and we will just lower the opacity. In this case, we'll go even lower. We'll go down to 40% opaque, so that's 60% transparent. And we'll click OK. So now we can actually see our units, and if we zoom in, I'm using the scroll wheel to zoom in on one of them, we can kind of see a nice outline in black, and then we can actually start to see a little bit of what's underneath. And now that's actually still too opaque. So I'm going to open up my layer dialog again. I'm going to go to my fill, and I'm going to lower that opacity all the way down to 20%. Like that, and then I'll click OK. And now we can see, okay, we can actually see through it pretty well. We can actually see some of the features in the image that's below, which is pretty cool. A couple other tools that will be useful for you for moving around. We have this sort of hand tool, and that lets you pan the map by clicking and dragging. So that's pretty neat. You have your zoom tools over here. You have one that I didn't show you, which is Zoom Full, which will zoom out to the full extent of your project over here. So there's a bunch of other things. Again, we can use this to zoom to layer over here. And that gets us right back to where we're going. Okay. Let's say we wanted to, we're going to deal with queries and that kind of stuff probably next time. But let's say in this particular case, we wanted to change the color of the raster. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense for this particular image that we're looking at here because it's a satellite image, but if it was a digital surface model, which we do have for this region, you might want to change the colors of that. In fact, what I will do is add that to, it's not in the project file that I've uploaded now, but I will add it to a new project file so you have that. Now, I happen to know where it is on my particular desktop. Let's see, I have it here, and let's see, it's this one that I'm interested in. Oh, nope, it was the other one. This one that I was interested in here, okay? So now I've added these layers here, which are raster elevation files. And they kind of look not very great immediately off the bat. I'll just focus on this one right here. It's like really dark over here, and what is all this stuff? So we want to change those colors. So the same deal over here, we can either right click and go to properties, or we can double click it, and we will get the same kind of dialog, but this is now for a raster file. And it looks a little different from the vector file. In the style tab, we have this thing where it says band rendering, render type, single band, gray. All right. In fact, what we want to do is to change this render type first to single band pseudo color. And this is what's going to let us apply color rules to the elevation data that's actually in this raster. So right now the color rules are simply black to white. So the larger the number, the whiter, the lower the number, the darker the black. All right. So in this case, it's probably 256 shades of gray that were applied to it, so we don't get a lot of variation. It's really hard to see. Once we change it now to pseudocolor, we're going to leave this band thing alone because we only have one band. It shows us the minimum and maximum numbers that we actually have in the data file itself. And then we have a bunch of other things over here. The most interesting one for you to mess around with first is where it says color. And right now we have these ramps. So this is blue to purple, boo poo right here. If you click on it, you get a whole bunch of other ones. So let's just pick a simple one, blue to green, like that. It will do an automatic classification for you right now. So that's fine. We'll just hit apply. And now we've changed our ramp from a lightish blue to a darkish green. It does look better, but it doesn't look perfect at the moment. Let's try and pick a different one that has more colors in it. Let's say purple and orange right here. And now we see that it goes through multiple colors. If we hit apply, we're starting to see some more variation in there, starting to make a little bit more sense. Now, we have a lot of purple going on in this particular map, so I don't know that I would stick with that as my main color, but you can just mess around with some of them here. This red, yellow, blue one is one of the nicer ones to sort of really get good color variation as you go up. So now you can see the mountains over here in blue, and you can see the valley in deep red. But maybe we want to change the way the colors are spread across our values. That's where we go to where it says interpolation. We can change some of these things, and we may get, in this case, a more discrete variation. We can change it to exact, and well, it doesn't show up in this particular map. We can just apply. We can just fool around with these things to see the difference that they actually make. We can actually make cutoffs over here. Let's say we don't care about the mountains. We change this to 3000. We can see what happens over here when we hit apply. Now we see above 3000, it's all just solid blue. That gives us a better spread down here. We can even change that to like 1000. And now we can see more variation in the valley, and we lose the sort of nuances in the mountains over here. We'll deal a little bit with this stuff going forward. I should say we can invert the colors as well, so we can get the blues in place of the red. There's a whole bunch of fun stuff that we can do here in all of this stuff. We can also make this layer transparent. We go to this in this case for rasters, a transparency tab. And that's what we got here. We said 30% transparent. Now we can actually see through it. All right, so you can actually see that by messing with the colors and by messing with the transparencies for all our different layers, we can get a really nice style for a map that we might want to make. And we can actually mess with the layers, right, the actual order of the layers, and we can get something kind of cool and get a lot of data fused together. Now, one word of caution here is that there is such a thing as too much data fused together, too much transparency, too many layers on top of all the other layers. So you have to use your judgment. We're trying to convey information to a person who's looking at this data. We don't want to obfuscate or obscure the story that we're trying to tell, but cramming too much information or using wild colors and all of that kind of stuff. We're going to talk more about cartography, about the method and theory of presenting data in map formats next time or the time after. But this is really just to show you how to do all this stuff. So I've made a really crazy, terrible looking map right now. I would never publish this. I would never print this out. This is really just me picking colors just to show you how you can pick those colors. When you've got a map that's styled the way you want, that the layers are all set up, the best thing to do at that point is to save out a project, okay? And you do this over here from the Project Save As layer dialog, or just save once you've got one. Now, I've got one project already made over here, so I can just save over that. What this does means next time I start QGIS, I can bring in that project file and I'll look at exactly what I'm looking at now. I don't have to reload in all the layers from my browser dialog. I don't have to go back in and style them. Now, very important thing to understand is that the project file in QGIS does not save any real data to it. All it saves is the path, the file path, to the actual data layers and the information about how you've styled them in QGIS the last time you messed with the properties dialog. There's no real data. So the project file needs to maintain a relationship in the computer in terms of the pathway through all the files to the folders to the files that you've put here. If you move one of the GIS files to a different folder, the project will open up and say, cannot find this layer. Layer is missing. Go and look for it maybe on your computer and I will relink it, but it's not where it was last time, so I don't know where to find it. Okay. Also importantly, saving the project is important to get you back in terms of looking at these layers the way they were, but it does nothing to save the actual data. In order to save data, you need to save out an actual data file. And we're going to do that next time, but what we're going to talk about, the last thing now, is how to organize your projects in QGIS to make it so that you're not always faced with broken data links and all these other things that don't work. You'll notice that I've already done a little bit of this for you. Okay, I've done a little bit of this for you in the zip file that I gave you. I have Talgar GIS data. That is a human readable, intelligible name that tells us exactly what's in here. It is GIS data about the region of Talgar, which we all happen to know now, you know too, is in southeast Kazakhstan. Once we open that up, this is our project folder. Okay, this is where all the data related to Talgar is going to live from here on out. Now we have to do this ourselves. We have to be conscious of this. Once we open that, we have some more organization. We have the project file that I saved out. Then we have two folders that are labeled raster and vector. Okay, these are going to be your top level data holders, data directories, data folders for this project. What's really important is all these things are below the level of this, so that they all are in one folder together, and then inside this is data. In this case, this is our Landsat pan sharpened image. I will eventually put the GeoTIFFs, which are digital elevation models for the same region. I will also put them in this same folder. So you'll have probably 3 GeoTIFF files in here. And that's great. Keep all the raster data in the file, the folder that says raster data, right? All in here. And you'll see that this particular GeoTIFF has what we call a sidecar file, an XML file. This contains some metadata, which is data about the data. In this case, it's about the projection information system, which we're not talking about today, but we'll talk about next time. The other folder in here is vector. Inside this, you will see a series of other individual folders. Vector data for the kind of vector data that we're working with are called shapefiles, and they come with multiple sidecar files. The main one is the one that's called .shp, but you need to have all of these things with the .shp for QGIS to read them properly. So these things cannot get separated from each other, but it's up to you to keep them together. So the best way to do that is to create a folder that shares the same name as the shapefile inside of it. Now, in terms of GIS, all 4 of these things are one file, even though in terms of computer, the computer sees them as 4 different things. So they absolutely have to stay together in the same folder. And you don't want to have a whole bunch of them because, especially if they're similarly named, it's really difficult to tell which sidecar file goes with which actual shapefile, right? Which is why I keep them all separated in individual files, folders where they have basically the same name. Some of them have more sidecar files than other, but typically what you need are at least just these 4 right here. Okay? Now, keep your project files. You can have multiple project files relating to these data, but keep them in this upper level directory so that they're always looking downstream at directories that live below them. And the reason why you want to do that is you don't want this vector file to be outside of your project file, because if you want to move this project to a thumb drive or to a different computer or something like that, you don't want to have to move a bunch of different folders together and keep them kind of in the same relationship, because the paths will all break. And it will all break in a big way if you have the file folders in different parts of your computer and you try and move them to a new computer. The pathways, which are this little string up here at the top, it's going to be totally different on the new computer. As long as everything you need to work on is within one folder, in this case I've called it Talgar GIS Data, then you can literally just copy this one folder to a thumb drive, to a new computer, and all the relative paths in the project are going to transfer perfectly fine. You'll be able to open the project on any computer and it will find all the layers and it won't give you any problems. So this is what we call a digital asset management scheme. All your layers are digital assets. They're just like photos or videos or sound files or something like that. And you have to make sure that they're organized in a logical way that you maintain so that compatibility of the pathways to these files doesn't break as you move around. This is incredibly important with QGIS. It's on you to do this. You have to be very aware from the beginning. So don't create projects haphazardly. Don't put data files all over your computer. Be organized and follow my example over here of how to do it. I think that will do it for this particular practicum. We're already getting kind of on the long side. And we'll go over all of this stuff in class. So I'm going to end it here, and I will see you in just a little bit. All right.